All right, get ready to dive deep into some core ABA concepts, but with a twist.
A twist.
Yeah, you know how sometimes those basic principles, they seem pretty straightforward on the surface.
Right.
Well, today we're going to uncover what's really going on underneath. We're cracking open Chapter 14, Science and Human Behavior, to see how multiple factors can influence even the simplest actions.
I like it. Always good to go beyond the surface level.
Exactly. Ready to have some of those aha moments that shift your perspective.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so the chapter kicks off by talking about how science often starts with simplifying things before tackling those real-life complexities.
That's true. It's like building a house. You need that solid foundation first, before you start adding those fancy details.
It's so true, and that makes me think about how we use those simplified scenarios in ABA training, like Boyle's Law, relating gas, volume, and pressure.
Yeah, good example.
It illustrates a principle, but obviously, real-world behavior, it's way more complicated.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Is that kind of what this chapter's getting at?
Exactly. Just like Boyle's Law didn't initially account for, say, temperature, we can't just focus on one single factor when we're trying to understand why people do what they do.
Right, right.
We got to think about those multiple influences on behavior, especially as MBA professionals. We're dealing with those messy complexities all the time.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. The chapter talks about this idea of multiple effects from a single event, and they use the example of punishment, which really caught my eye. Are you telling me punishment can do more than just decrease a behavior?
It absolutely can. And that's where things get really, really interesting. Because think about it. Punishment can trigger like a reflex, like jumping when I hear a loud noise.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It can also totally change our emotional state, make us feel anxious, scared.
Right.
And believe it or not, punishment can even act as reinforcement in some cases.
Wait, hold on. How can punishment be reinforcing? That seems like completely counterintuitive to everything we learn in ABA.
I know, right? It sounds so strange. But let me give you an example. So imagine a child who throws a tantrum to get attention. Even if you scold them, you're still giving them attention, right?
Oh, I see.
Which might be exactly what they were looking for.
Wow, yeah.
So in that case, the punishment, the scolding, it's actually reinforcing that very behavior you're trying to decrease.
That's a real game changer. It makes you realize that it's so important to understand all the potential effects of our interventions, not just the intended ones.
Absolutely. If we aren't super careful, we could be unintentionally reinforcing those unwanted behaviors.
Oh, for sure.
And that's why having a deep understanding of these multiple effects, it's really crucial.
Okay, so how do we reconcile this with, our understanding of reinforcement and punishment? It feels like we're adding like this whole other layer of complexity to something we thought we knew.
That's the beauty of ABA, isn't it? We are always learning and refining our understanding. And this chapter, it actually uses this concept of satiation to further illustrate how multiple effects can be at play at the same time. Think about it. Giving a child a giant piece of their favorite candy.
Oh, yeah.
They might initially be super thrilled, gobble it all up.
They're going to be sick of it for a while, right?
Exactly. They might even refuse more candy, even though candy is usually a strong reinforcer for them.
Right.
They are temporarily satiated.
I see.
But this doesn't mean the law of effect is wrong. It's still there. It's just interacting with another factor.
So it's not just about whether something's reinforcing or punishing in general, but also about the individual's current states and how that interacts with a consequence.
Exactly. And, this ties into the idea of need gratification in therapy, too. Because if you can satisfy a particular need, like for attention, escape, or even sensory stimulation, you can sometimes weaken those undesirable behaviors that are associated with that need.
This makes me think about how important it is to conduct really thorough assessments. We need to understand what's driving our clients' behaviors. We can't just assume we know what's reinforcing or punishing for them at any given moment.
You're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. This chapter really emphasizes that behavior is rarely, if ever, driven by one single factor. It's a complex interplay of multiple influences. And it's our job as ABA professionals to kind of unpack those influences and use that knowledge to design truly effective interventions.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. So we got this single event, like taking a child candy, and it can have multiple effects. But then the chapter kind of dives into this other fascinating concept, multiple causes for a single behavior. I'm ready to explore that.
All right, let's get into it. It's like a river. It's formed by all those smaller streams coming together. Each one contributes to the flow.
Okay, I like that analogy. So we're shifting gears a bit here. From one event having multiple effects to multiple things actually causing one specific behavior.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting for us in the ABA world. Let's say you are working with a client who's learning a new skill, right?
Yeah.
Their motivation to learn that skill, it can come from a bunch of different places.
Like wanting to earn a reward or wanting to please their therapist. Or maybe they just, enjoy the challenge of learning something new.
Exactly. And each of those motivations, just like those streams feeding into a river, they all contribute to that overall likelihood that they'll actually do the behavior we're looking for. The chapter even talks about generalized reinforcers, like money.
Oh yeah, money.
Perfect example.
Because money itself isn't inherently rewarding, is it? It's what you can get with it.
Right. It can be exchanged for so many different things that people find reinforcing. Money can get you food, entertainment, social status, even a sense of security.
Right?
It's associated with so many different types of reinforcement that it becomes this really powerful motivator.
This is making me think about how, as ABA professionals, we can be even more strategic in how we use reinforcement. It's not just about finding one thing that motivates a client. It's about really understanding all those different things that add up to their overall motivation.
That's a really good point. Imagine you are trying to help a client learn to complete a chore, right? You could use praise.
Oh yeah,
You
praise.
could use like a token economy system
Uh-huh.
and even just, access to a preferred activity as reinforcement. So you're basically tapping into these different sources of motivation to make it more likely they'll engage in the behavior.
So it's like you're making the intervention more robust, by appealing to all those different things.
Exactly. And it's not just about like tangible rewards, right? Think about those combined reinforcements, like enjoying the snack at a meeting, but also enjoying the discussion.
Oh, right.
Those are multiple causes contributing to your willingness to go.
It's like the saying, a man's heart is in his work. It's not just about the paycheck, you know.
Right.
It's about feeling valued, contributing to something meaningful, and maybe even just enjoying the company of your coworkers. All of those things create, a good work experience.
Exactly. Multiple causes, they often involve a mix of like practical and emotional factors, some tangible, some intangible. And I think that understanding can be really, really valuable in ABA,
Yeah.
both in designing interventions and in understanding our clients.
Okay, so we've talked about how, multiple effects can come from one event and how multiple causes can lead to one behavior. But the chapter goes even deeper, right? It talks about language being particularly susceptible to this idea of multiple causation.
It does. Verbal behavior is maybe the most complex example of this. How multiple factors can come together to influence just one little response. Think about everything that goes into saying even a single word.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You have epoic behavior, where you repeat what you hear.
Like a kid learning to say mama by imitating their parent.
Exactly. And then you have intraverbal associations, where words are linked together in your mind, based on your experiences.
Hmm.
Textual stimuli from reading and nonverbal stimuli from just interacting with the world.
Oh, wow. So every word we say is like the tip of the iceberg.
I like that. Yeah.
There's this whole network of influence underneath.
And that's what makes language so fascinating, but also challenging
Oh, for sure.
to analyze from an ABA perspective, at least, because we can't just look at the words, right? We
Right.
have to think about all the things that contribute to their meaning.
It's like we're not just teaching language. We are trying to decode it, looking for clues in their history, their environment.
Exactly.
It's a whole other level.
And that can be so valuable when you're working with clients who have communication difficulties, because by understanding all the different things that are impacting their verbal behavior, then we can actually create more effective interventions and support their communication development.
Okay, I'm really starting to see how this chapter is taking those core ABA concepts and adding layers of complexity and nuance to them. It's definitely challenging, but also really exciting.
It is. And the chapter, it goes on to explore how we can actually use this whole idea of multiple causation to control behavior through suggestions and probes.
All right, I'm ready for more. Let's dive into those techniques. Okay, so we've covered how one event can have all these different effects and how multiple causes can end up leading to just one behavior. But now let's talk about using this in our actual ABA practice. The chapter brings up these ideas of suggestion and probes, and I'm really curious to hear more about those and how they fit in with everything we've been talking about.
This is where things get really practical because both suggestions and probes, they both utilize the supplementary variables that we've been talking about, but in different ways. So suggestion, it's about kind of guiding behavior in a specific direction, while probes, they help us uncover those hidden behaviors that we might not see otherwise. Think about it this way. Suggestion is like a gentle nudge. Probes are more like detective work.
Okay, I see that distinction. So how do they actually work, though?
Well, with suggestions, the chapter talks about two main types. formal suggestions and thematic suggestions. So formal suggestions, they use stimuli that are very similar in form to the response that we want. Like if you're trying to get someone to say the word apple, you might show them a picture of an apple.
Makes sense. So then a thematic suggestion would be using something that's related to the idea, but not that exact same form.
Exactly. Like, asking what's your favorite fruit to get them thinking about apples.
Gotcha.
So thematic suggestions, they use stimuli that are related in meaning but different in form. And you've probably encountered these types of suggestions in everyday life. Think about all those little subtle cues we use all the time to guide behavior without, actually coming out and saying it directly.
Yeah, it's making me think about how I interact with my clients. I'm always giving these little hints and prompts, often without even realizing it.
Exactly.
So how do probes fit into all of this then?
Probes are really cool because they're all about uncovering those behaviors that might not be super obvious. The chapter talks about formal probes, like the verbal summator, and that uses vague auditory stimuli to kind of evoke these latent verbal responses.
Wait, so you're saying that by presenting these like ambiguous sounds, you can actually trigger someone to say things that they wouldn't normally say?
Yeah.
What kind of insights can you get from that?
It can be really helpful, especially if you are working with clients who have a hard time expressing themselves, because sometimes by using formal probes, you can kind of tap into those underlying thoughts and emotions that might be, impacting their behavior.
So it's like you're giving them this safe space to kind of explore those hidden associations and patterns in their thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are thematic probes, like word association tests, and those use what we call intraverbal stimuli, so basically word pairs, to see what connections kind of pop up in their mind. And these can also give us a lot of valuable information about their past experiences, their motivation, and even their emotional states.
It's like you're piecing together a puzzle, using these different types of probes to kind of illuminate all those hidden pieces and really, really understand the person. I can see how this could be like super helpful in trailering interventions for sure.
Absolutely, because by understanding those underlying influences, we can be more effective at, addressing the root causes of some of those challenging behaviors and really supporting their growth and development.
It strikes me that we've kind of come full circle here, back to this idea of multiple causation. We're not just focusing on what's happening on the surface, but really considering all those hidden factors that might be contributing.
Exactly. And the chapter goes even further, talking about projection and identification, which also involve combining those existing behaviors with supplementary stimuli.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about this. It's like when you project your own feelings onto someone else, or when you identify so strongly with a character in a book that you actually start to like feel and act like them.
Exactly. It really highlights how our behavior can be influenced by external stimuli, even stuff that's coming from fictional sources or just our perceptions of other people.
It makes me think about, how I relate to characters in books and movies. I can get so wrapped up in their stories.
Right.
I start to feel their emotions and see the world from their perspective.
And that's a perfect example of how these concepts can be applied in real life. But they also have important implications for us in ABA too. We really need to be aware of how our own biases and perceptions might be influencing how we see our clients' behavior.
That's such a good point. It's a reminder to always be questioning our assumptions and looking for all those multiple influences that might be, shaping our understanding.
This whole deep dive has really been about embracing the complexity of human behavior and recognizing that it's rarely as simple as it seems. And by understanding how these multiple effects and causes all work together, we can actually start to develop more effective and more nuanced interventions.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on some of those core ABA principles that I thought I already knew.
And remember, there's always more to learn. This chapter gives us a great framework for understanding multiple causation, but the exploration continues, right?
Right.
So challenge yourself to see these principles at play in your everyday interactions and especially in your practice.
Great advice. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep those aha moments coming.